I'm Rimma Boshernitsan, the founder and CEO of Dialogue. Welcome to 10 by 20, a series of 10 questions discussed in 20-minute dialogues with local and international leaders doing visionary work at the intersection of people, technology, and society. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Joseph White. Joseph's the Director of Design Strategy at Miller Knoll, and specifically focused on placemaking research, which focuses on understanding the relationship between human behavior and the built environment. He's also a self-taught weaver that launched a line of commercial upholstery, and he views textiles as being the easiest way to make tactile sensory impact to the environment. I'm so excited to have you, Joseph. Welcome.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about you. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know nearly enough. And so just tell me about who you are and where you grew up and anything you want to say about the early days of Joseph.
I guess if I were to start with the early days, both my mom and my dad both grew up really close to the land in the North Georgia foothills of Appalachia. Both of my grandparents were small scale beef cattle farmers, and while my parents moved away from the mountains, as we call it, sort of to the suburbs of Atlanta, I always felt a really strong connection to that. So for instance, my grandfather on my mom's side, Papa, as we called him, gave every grandchild in the family a cow. And this was our cow for life. And each year when that cow would have a calf, he would take it to auction and sell it. And the money from that sale for me went into an account, and all of my textbooks throughout college were paid for with that money.
That's amazing.
Which was like really an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And, because he didn't go through formal education, was a brilliant man, worked very hard. So that connection to the land, even though it wasn't something that was fully part of my lived experience, was also something that I carried with me and was really deep. And, when I think of the land of Appalachia, it's like I've had the fortunate benefit of being able to live on both the East Coast and the West Coast. And so I knew the Appalachian Mountains first. They're expansive, they're rolling. If you've ever seen them, they're just mystically beautiful, one rolling hill after another, this blue haze. There's just some quality about them that's very hard to put your finger on, but very distinct. Versus in the West Coast, there are these like bombastic hills, they're just like giant, they're sharp, they're very different. And the reason why is age. The Appalachian Mountains are, I believe, the second oldest mountain range on the face of the planet. So, years and years and years and years rolling over the land, wearing them down to these like moss-covered, gently rolling hills. There's an ancient wisdom to that land that was something that, and I've only gained the language for that recently, but something that has held tremendous value for me. So there's, I guess, from like earliest roots of family, these notions of hard work and mysticism and connection to something greater has really shaped my worldview and the way that I approach things. And when I started getting involved in taking an interest in design, first in architecture, and then very quickly getting pulled into interior design, I've carried those things with me. And that pull to interiors was really about realizing that unless you're creating sculpture, the only reason a building exists is to create an interior for people. And I wanted to focus on that relationship and that connection. So that's why I kind of transferred over. And those things have really guided my profession ever since.
Oh, I love that. How do you, for yourself, find the time and space to sort of connect all the dots, to think about those connections and like how they might inspire you or create more opportunities of work for you or craft for you?
This the universe gave me a gift about 10 years ago. I was at a dinner party where I'd met someone for the first time at this dinner party, and recounting a story of the first time that I'd ever seen a floor loom several years before, and how I was completely transfixed by this object. It's just this collection of simple machines. There are levers, pulleys, wedges, things along those lines. And I was just so drawn into this object. And I remember asking the person, oh my God, what is that? And her response was, oh, that's my loom. I never use it. It makes me want to rip my hair out. It's so complicated. And I was just like so bewildered. Like, how could you have this thing in your house and not touch it? I just felt so compelled. And I was telling the story at this dinner party and saying, oh, I looked into it. Looms are really expensive, and it is this kind of complicated thing. So I don't know if I'll ever really get into it because it's just this hunch. And this person just pipes up and says, hey, I've got one of those in my basement. If you want it, come and get it. And I just said, don't joke because I'll be there tomorrow. She said she was serious. I picked it up and immediately I just started teaching myself to weave through feel. You could kind of, because it's all about managing tension. And I could get a sense like, oh, this is supposed to be connected to that. And this is supposed to be connected here. And I can get a sense that this is sagging a little bit. And so like being able to learn something purely through feel and through your senses was something that was so magical to me. But beyond that, the gift was once I started to learn enough to get into the basic process of weaving, I was able to unlock the potential of the subconscious mind. Like I will never forget the first time that I was sitting there weaving and I was so focused on paying attention to this machine and the tension and everything that I was doing in that moment, that in the back of my mind, this idea to solve this problem that I wasn't even actively thinking on, but had been as part of my professional design work on the other side, it just popped into place. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so I realized that there was this beautiful relationship between the two. One of the other things that came up within that was that as soon as I started to try to rush the weaving process, I started making mistakes and I started stressing about doing the work, and I precluded the opportunity for the subconscious mind to do its work. So this notion of like, this shall not be rushed was kind of like this mantra that came about as part of the weaving process. So it's, I have to, if I don't protect that time and space, I don't get the opportunity for those creative insights to emerge. So it's like, for me, creativity emerges as an indirect product of something else entirely. So
absolutely. I can totally relate with that. How much time, how do you make time for it? What's like is there like a weekly or daily practice that you have?
If I'm being completely honest, it's a challenge. Like it's hard and it requires that kind of a commitment. And I've experimented and done different things over the years. The thing that works best for me is to plan out large blocks of time, like at some point in the future, and say, I'm going to devote this week or like these 2 days to get into it.
As you were talking, the thing that came to my head was like this tension between creativity and control.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
And to what end, right? Like, because you could conceptually meander in the weaving process and sort of just take roads less traveled by, and knowing that you may not end up in the end point where you think you will. And I know nothing about weaving, but I'm just assuming that that's the case, that you can be creative. But yet you're also executing against a vision in a way. Like it's such an interesting thing that I've like always ask a lot of my artist friends is like, how do you know when you're done with something? How do you know like that you have allowed yourself to explore it to its fullest? And then from there, you can then say, okay, yes, I want to go here, or I don't want to go here, without limiting yourself. So I'm just curious, how does that, like, how do you process all that?
It's, I'm thinking of, I wish I could appropriately attribute this statement. But I was in a workshop with someone once, and this guy made this statement that, tensions are not to be eliminated. Like, that's not something that you should try to do away with. Like, you should identify them and like relish in them, because there's learning at both sides, both ends. And I mean, where I'm at in my own development is to continually work to keep control in its place, and lean more into more of the improvisation, trusting my gut, my internal conscious, and not stressing too much about the plan, and allowing for a little more spontaneity in what comes forward. So it's a tricky balance, because you can't, for me, I know that if I throw out all of the spreadsheets and the rigorous planning, something will be lost. So this is not a zero-sum game.
It also just makes me think about when you create a design research project, right? Everything is sort of planned in advance as well. And there actually isn't that much room for a movement because you sort of know where the road that you need to get to, especially if you're executing on a timeline, right?
Look at the two poles here. You're essentially looking at structure and flexibility, or where's the freedom and where are the guidelines. And it's when I'm setting up a weaving project, it's like you have to plan the warp. And for those not familiar, those are the threads that run kind of front to back along the loom. And then the weft runs side to side horizontally. You have to make some very definitive decisions about the warp up front, and those are kind of like locked in place. Those don't change. But there's tremendous freedom still within working in the weft dimension, and a few other points of control that you have to introduce things that aren't part of the plan into that system. And so that notion of like, where's the structure and where's the freedom is part of the design process. So actually like designing some of that in and intentionally identifying areas where you don't know where it's going to go or where it might lead, and making sure that that's okay. So when you're designing a research project or designing a workplace, you need to do some similar things. And that requires taking time up front to say, what are our first principles? What are the things that are absolutely core to who we are and what we must do? And think about those at a really high level and bake those in. But then say, where are the opportunities that we have to flex? Where can we change and move and evolve more freely? And that is the biggest thing that I think that is missing in most design projects, particularly workplace design projects, is creating that time and space up front to do the introspection, to figure out what are the true first principles that we really must protect, and where can we open up the door to improvisation and innovation elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it makes me think about the choices we make in terms of like how we think about the structure of where we work and how those structures actually occupy parts of cities and what the meaning of those things are too, right? And sort of the relationship between inside and the outside and to each other. It's particularly interesting now. And I think it was fascinating before, but I feel like now the dialogue is a little bit richer because all of this stuff in the past year has come to the surface of like where we're now empowered and comfortable talking about the things that are most difficult, I think, for people to talk, what has been most difficult traditionally.
Yeah. And, the pandemic has been a tragedy, for sure. But the gift that it has given all of us is that without us asking, it slammed the brakes on this mindless machine of progress that was happening. And it forced a lot of people to stop and really reckon with their lives and what value meant to them individually. There's this so much ink, digital and otherwise, being spilled on the Great Resignation and all the reasons behind that. But for me, everyone was given pause to say, what do I really value in my life? What do I expect to get out of my time? What do I really need to be successful? And it's brought this incredibly bright light and clear focus on the work process that has allowed us to realize that a significant portion of the work experience, the corporate work experience in particular of the past, was theater. I mean, like, not really how work is getting done. Work was happening on nights and weekends and off hours and in the spaces in between those maddening conversations that you had with certain folks that were leading to fear or questioning of self-doubt, or like the physical environment and how it introduced those types of dynamics of hierarchy and things along those lines. Like, it's brought all of that to the forefront. And what that's allowing us to do is to realize that the office doesn't need to carry as much weight as we thought it did, in terms of like, every person needs a desk and chair and it's assigned. And now that we realize that a lot of people, not everyone can, but a lot of people can find focus and some degree of productivity outside of the workplace, it frees up that space to support the types of interaction that it really needs to support. And those we're finding are more along the lines of social connection, building culture, getting to know your peers as people, not as part of the corporate machine. And that's part of the real value of that kind of space. And furthermore, acknowledging that those moments of social connection are part of work. Like actually closing the computer, putting down the pen, stepping away from the project is a critical part of being successful in work. So when we were talking earlier about the value that I've gained from weaving and being able to create space for the subconscious mind, like that can happen within the context of organizations as well. And so an organization being able to afford its people the ability to step away, like do they actually have comfortable homes that can serve as a respite for the struggles of daily life? Like organizations should be thinking about that and looking at how what supporting their workers actually means in this new context. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's also important. And I think, I mean, I even find out we have like a team of 6 people right now that I'm working with. And I have to like remind myself, because I'm not seeing everyone. I'm not like feeling them, and they're not with me necessarily. I have to remind myself to check in on the human level, not
yeah,
just kind of let's run through our to-dos or what we need to get done or action items, but it really is like, how are you? How are you feeling? What are you doing? And then really, and remembering what are people, and then following up. And I think these are all things that we normally do when we're running into people in the hallway or in meetings, but it's so easy to start focusing on only the thing that you need to get done so that you can move on and do your life, especially in the context of home. So I can't agree with you more. I feel like the biggest learning is that we've come to the conclusion that we're all human, you know, and like hello, where have we been? And then and what's important in the value, and what would happen if like if money was no object, right? Like what would this exchange feel like? Like would it be satisfying, or are we, you know, are you doing your work because you happen to be really good at it, but is it not feeding the, you know, this part of you that really makes you whole?
you know, Miller Knoll is part of this group called Future Forum, which is this consortium of companies, Slack, Boston Consulting Group, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, Miller Knoll. Those are kind of the founding partners. BCG did this piece on, you know, metrics in this new, more hybrid, flexible age of work, and provided 2 like high level guideposts on that. You know, one, you want to make sure in the course of work, are you generating value? The first one being, you know, are we serving our customers? Are we serving the people that our business is intended to serve? Obvious first place to start. But second, and equally important, are we serving those customers in a way that allows our people to continually learn and grow? Are they feeling fulfilled through the work that they're doing? Because if you're serving your customer, but not in a way that is refueling the tank of your organization, you're going to lead to burnout, and that's not going to lead to sustainable growth. In my mind, this is how we can start to approach conversations around automation and bringing things like that into the workplace in a way that is humane. This is not about displacing jobs, which that will definitely happen. But if we don't do the work to figure out how to continually ladder people up to finding fulfillment through their work, then it's all for naught. Like it's, you know, you have to be careful to use these drivers of innovation and change for the benefit of the collective whole, as opposed to the benefit of the corporate bank account alone. That is not a sustainable path forward.
No, absolutely. And it just brings me full circle to like to our earlier point around the wisdom that you can gain by like just sitting with who you are and how you are and what does that mean to you. So are you ready for our rapid fire?
For sure.
Cool. So we'll do this quickly, 1 word, 2 word kind of answers. When do you feel most connected to others?
On the dance floor.
When and where are you happiest?
In the woods.
What intersection of disciplines are you currently most fascinated by?
I'm not going to be able to do this in 1 to 2 words.
Okay, fine, 3 words.
Well, I have to give a shout out to some organizations. Fiber Shed on the West Coast, Slow Factory on the East Coast, and the name of a specific person, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And all of this is about the intersection of native knowledge, really starting with that deep ancestral understanding of the way the world works, and really bringing that into the conversation, because it should be the conversation. And those groups that I mentioned are using that as a cornerstone, but also bridging forward into modern technology and, you know, the structures of our society. That is the thing that is most exciting to me.
Yeah. Oh, and me too. We can go on for hours, for sure. What is your greatest regret?
This sounds so corny. I don't dwell on regret. I mean, to live is to learn, and as soon as you stop learning, you die. So
I love that.
Everything has benefit if you look at it through that lens.
And what's the one thing you'd want to pass on to the next generation?
Slow down. Don't let other people define your value system, or more importantly, how you will deliver value. That's something that you have to decide yourself and figure out how that fits in with the bigger picture.
Awesome. Thank you, Joseph. This was so fun. Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue's 10 by 20 interview series, where we ask 10 questions in 20 minutes to profile international leaders working at the intersection of people, technology, and society. That's all for today's episode. Like and subscribe below to get notified for our upcoming interviews. Follow us on Instagram at dialogue_co.